All right, 5-4, day 2, completing the square. Same objectives. Now we're going to work on actually completing the square. All right, so to complete the square of x squared plus bx, so there's no constant term at the end, we need to add b divided by 2 squared. All right, so there's an example of doing it with numbers and with the algebra. All right, you already have a copy of this, so you can use that as reference. So we're going to complete the square for the expression. I'm going to write the resulting expression as a binomial squared. You know from definitions, binomial, two terms. So x squared minus 14x plus blank. So we're going to fill in the blank. So first step, we need to find b over 2 squared. All right. So we know by looking that negative 14 is our b value. So plug in negative 14. Negative 14 over 2 squared. Do the inside parentheses first, order of operations. Negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49. Now you just add it in the expression, so where we had our blank spot. So x squared minus 14x plus 49. Now we need to factor the perfect square trinomial. That's what we made. So we're going to factor it. We learned how to do that. So you take square root of this term, the square root of this term, and you take this sign. You get x minus 7, the quantity squared. So now we're going to check it to make sure it's right. It comes back to what we got. So x minus 7 times x minus 7, you FOIL it. First outers, inners last. You get x squared minus 7x plus 49. Combine like terms, x squared minus 14x plus 49. And that's what we got. So we know we did it right. Boom! Your turn. Write it down. Enter it online. Don't be scared. Fractions are your friend. You will see fractions. Don't be scared of them. Alright, so solving quadratic equations, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by completing the square. These are the steps. You also have a copy of this on the handout. We're going to use these steps to solve. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing. We need to collect all the variable terms onto one side. Okay? So 3x squared plus 18x equals 45. We just wrote it in order, standard form. X squared term first. Alright, if the coefficient out front, alright, of x squared is not 1, divide everything by the value out front. So in this instance, it's a 3, as we can see. The a term out here in front of the x squared is a 3. Divide everything by 3. Alright, so you're going to divide the 3x squared by 3, the 18x by 3, and the 45 by 3. When we do that, the result is x squared plus 6x equals 15. Now we're going to set it up to complete the square. Okay, so we're going to leave blank spots with where the values are that we need to fill in. We're going to focus right now on this side. Alright, completing the square like we did in the previous example. Whatever value we put in here, we're also going to fill in here. Okay, so find b over 2 squared. Our b value is 6, so plug it in. 6 over 2 is 6 divided by 2, or 6 over 2 is the same as 3. So we're going to square that and we get 9. So we're going to add the b over 2 squared to both sides and then simplify. So fill in 9 here and fill in 9 here. Alright, when we simplify this, we're not going to do anything on this side yet, but simplify this side. 15 plus 9 is 24. Now we're going to move into our equation. It's exactly like what we were doing before. Okay, exactly what we did in the previous example. We're going to take factor our perfect square trinomial that we created. Alright, so when you take that, your a term was just 1. So we take the square root of the first term. X squared is x. We filled that in here. It was plus 6x, so we take the plus. And plus 9 at the end, so the square root of 9 is 3. We filled that in. And we have what the right side was also equal to. Now we're just going to go through and do the steps of what we did in completing the square day one stuff. So you're going to take the square root of both sides. You end up with x plus 3 on the left because the square root cancels out the squared. And the square root of 24 is positive or negative square root of 24. Now solve for x. So you got to get x by itself. Doing that, you subtract 3 from both sides. You have x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 24. Okay, you have to be able to simplify this down. Okay, you're not done yet because the square root of 24 is not in its simplest form. Okay, I can break it down. The factors of 24 are 4 and 6. All right, so I have my square root of 4 and my square root of 6. Square root of 4 is a perfect square, so I can simplify that one step further. So I have x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 6. All right, this is the same as having two separate answers. Okay, negative 3 minus 2 square roots of 6 and negative 3 plus 2 square roots of 6. So a lot of this stuff is just combining stuff we've been doing in other sections. So put it all together. Now you try number 2. All right, write it down, work it through, enter it online. All right, I have one more example that's a little more involved with where your answer is going to be. All right, so it's not something you have to watch, but it's a good reference. So let's go over that one. All right, we're going to solve it the exact same way that we did before. All right, get all of your variable terms on one side. So I have my x squared minus 9x on the left, and then I bring my 2 over by adding it, so I get positive 2 on the right. The coefficient in front of the x squared is not 1. Divide everything by that value. When I look at mine here, it already is, so there's nothing to do. I keep it the same. Next step, set up to complete the square. So in doing that, I add my empty boxes. All right, so I'm going to add the value here. And we're doing this because you add something on one side, you got to do it on the other. So now we're going to need to find our b over 2 squared. B is 9, so I plug in 9. Negative 9. So negative 9 halves squared, you square the top, you square the bottom. A negative times negative is positive, so I get 81/4. All right, I'm going to replace that value into both sides of my completing the square equation. So I'm going to put 81/4 here and 81/4 here. Looks like that. And now we need to simplify it. I have to simplify everything on this side. So I need to add 2 and 81/4. Okay, when I do that, 2 is the same as 8 over 4, and then I add the numerators. So 8 plus 81 is 89/4. So that is simplified. All right, now we need to go back and do our perfect square trinomial. Okay, so everything on this side is a perfect square trinomial. So I'm going to factor this down. The square root of x squared is x. I take my minus sign, and the square root of 81/4 is 9/2. You see we had it up here. Okay, so when I take the factor my perfect square trinomial, I get x minus 9/2 squared equals 89/4. Take the square root of both sides. All right, square roots cancel out squareds, so I'm left with x minus 9/2, and that equals positive or negative square roots of 89/4. All right, so now you need to finish solving this. So to finish solving it, what do? We add 9/2 to both sides. All right, I get x equals 9/2 plus or minus the square root of 89/4. And now you're just simplifying everything down from here. All right, so in order to do that, we take the square root of anything we can over here. So the square root of 89/4 is the same as the square root of 89 over the square root of 4. That simplifies down. The square root of 4 is 2. All right, so everything else is still the same. I do have a common denominator here. All right, so I can write it all over one common denominator. That gives me x equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 89/2. And this is really two separate answers. 9 plus the square root of 89/2 and 9 minus the square root of 89/2. All right, that's a more involved one just because there's a fraction in there and you have to learn to deal with it. All right, so it is there for you as an aid, as another example of something that's a little more difficult.